In the quiet afternoon of River Glen, a gunshot tore through the stillness. A small golden dog collapsed on the crosswalk as a little girl screamed for help. Folks thought it was just a tragic, split-second mistake. But no one knew the truth. That dog had just saved the child from a danger the whole town missed. And even fewer knew who the girl's father really was. River Glen slept through most afternoons. The lake lay flat as glass beyond the trees. The traffic light on Main Street blinked its slow red-yellow cycle, and the only real sound came from the soft jingle of a bell on a dog's collar. Misty trotted beside the crosswalk, golden coat catching the pale sun, her nose tasting the air even when everything looked quiet. She moved the way trained dogs move, never drifting far from the small girl at her side. Harper's backpack bounced against her shoulders with each step, but Misty's pace stayed steady, matching her shoulder to knee. Every few feet the dog's ears twitched, tracking cars, footsteps, the distant clatter from Hatcher's Market loading dock. Calm was nice, but calm never fooled her. Across the street, a pickup rolled to a stop outside the market. Doors creaked, someone laughed, and a cart rattled over cracked pavement. Misty's head turned, eyes following the sound, then slid back to Harper. The girl was humming under her breath, sneakers scuffing the chalk lines faded on the sidewalk, trusting the world to stay gentle as long as her dog stayed close. By the front of Wanda's coffee corner, an older woman wiped down metal tables, watching them the way people in small towns do. She lifted a hand in a lazy wave. Harper waved back, but Misty barely spared her a glance. The dog's gaze stayed low, sweeping tires, shadows under parked cars, the spill of trash near the alley where the wind held scents longer than it should. At the corner, the walk sign blinked green. Harper stepped toward the crosswalk, and Misty slid slightly ahead, body angling to put herself between the girl and the lane of cars. It was automatic, a habit drilled by a patient voice and firm hands in a backyard training session long before this quiet afternoon. Protect, block, wait until it's safe, then move. A delivery truck growled somewhere behind them, gears shifting as it came around the bend. Misty picked up the vibration through her paws before the sound grew loud, head turning, muscles tensing just enough to break the lazy curve of her spine. Her tail still wagged, but slower now, like it was thinking things through. Calm air, new engine, heavy weight. On the far side of Main, a patrol car rolled into view, blue stripe cutting through its white paint. Officer Brent Harlow drove with his window half down, radio murmuring. Beside him, Sergeant Cole Maddox scowled at the sunlight, rubbing a hand over a jaw that hadn't seen sleep in too long. In back, Officer Dana Kemp leaned forward, eyes already searching, brain, wired to the word aggressive from the dispatch call. Dispatch had been a blur of fear and half-heard details. Dog going crazy. Little girl. Big guy with some kind of containers. Jenna Ruiz's voice still echoed in Brent's head. Training told him to picture worst case first. A lunging dog, a child screaming, teeth, speed, blood. He hated that image, but it was there, etched behind his eyes as the car rolled closer. Misty didn't know about radio codes or misheard panic on a phone line. She knew the taste of rubber from tires rolling too fast, the sharp metallic dust that floated down from old trucks, the way Harper's heartbeat sped up whenever engines roared too close. The truck behind them hit the gas a little harder, and the vibration in her bones jumped like a warning. Harper tightened her grip on the leash without thinking, feeling Misty's body go rigid. "It's okay, girl," she murmured, eyes on the white stripes painted across the road. Ahead, the supermarket doors slid open with a soft hiss, letting out a wave of cold air and grocery smells. The world still looked ordinary, safe enough for a 10-year-old to believe. The delivery truck's horn blared, long and impatient, bouncing off the brick storefronts like a slap. Misty flinched, then lunged sideways, not toward Harper, but across her, shoulders slamming into the girl's legs to shove her back from the street. Harper stumbled with a small yelp, arms pinwheeling as the leash snapped taut and the bell on Misty's collar rang sharp. From the patrol car, it all collapsed into a single, ugly frame. Brent saw a big dog explode sideways, a kid's small body jerk, the leash whip, the truck bearing down, and all the warnings in his head screamed that this was it, the split second every trainer had promised would someday come. His hand moved faster than his thoughts. Grip, draw, sight, squeeze. The shot cracked through River Glen like the sky had split. Birds erupted from the sycamore trees. Someone dropped a grocery bag, oranges scattering across hot pavement. Misty's body jerked, paws sliding on the paint of the crosswalk, eyes flicking once toward Harper as if checking that she was still there. Then her legs folded and the world tilted, her weight collapsing into the girl's arms. For a heartbeat, everything else forgot how to move. The truck brake screamed and locked, stopping short. Harper's voice tore the silence, high and raw, as she dropped to her knees, hands pressing into golden fur already turning dark and wet. Misty tried to breathe around the burn in her chest and the heavy, spreading warmth, but the air coming in felt thin and far away, like it belonged to another afternoon. That morning, River Glen woke up slow. Misty lay curled at the foot of Harper's bed, listening to the creaks of the old house and the faint rattle of the heater coming on. When Harper's alarm chirped, the dog was already standing, front paws on the mattress, tail thumping a soft, steady beat against the frame like a gentle drum roll for the day. Harper laughed, still half asleep, and wrapped her arms around Misty's neck, burying her face in warm fur that still smelled faintly of lake water and shampoo. Misty leaned into it, patient, feeling the small hands move over her collar, over the metal tag that clinked when they bumped it. Downstairs, a coffee maker sputtered and a chair scraped back on the kitchen floor. Dylan Lane moved like a man already thinking 3 steps ahead, even in his own kitchen. He flipped pancakes one-handed and reached for his mug with the other, eyes cutting to the doorway just as Misty trotted in, nails ticking on the worn tile. She went straight to him, sitting square at his boot, watching his face for whatever came next. Orders, praise, a look. He dropped a hand to her head, fingers sliding between her ears. "Morning, girl," he murmured. Misty pressed her head into his palm, recognizing something in the weight of his touch that Harper didn't, the way soldiers greet someone they trust. Harper barreled in a second later, socks sliding, hair a mess, and the kitchen felt instantly smaller, brighter, full of her chatter. They ate crowded around the tiny table, sunlight sneaking through the blinds in narrow strips. Misty lay between chair legs, chin on her paws, brown eyes tracking every forkful. She wasn't begging. Dylan had trained that out of her. But each time Harper laughed or kicked her heels, Misty's tail swept the floor once, as if to answer, "I'm here, I hear you." When it was time to go, Harper shrugged into her faded fox backpack. Misty stood at once, almost before the zipper finished closing. Dylan knelt to adjust the blue bandana at her neck, fingers quick and sure as if he were checking straps on a vest. "Same deal as always," he said quietly. "Feet on the sidewalk, eyes on the street. You watch her. I'll watch you." Misty held his gaze for a heartbeat, reading more in his face than in the words. Harper squeezed between them with a huff. "Dad, we're going to be late." Dylan brushed her cheek with his thumb, hiding the shadow in his eyes. "You've got 10 minutes. That's early in grown-up time." He opened the door, and cold autumn air rolled in, bringing the day with it. Out on Main Street, Misty fell into position without a word. She took the spot to Harper's left, just off the edge of the sidewalk, body angled slightly toward the road. The town had its morning sounds now. A distant boat motor on the lake, a delivery van backing up, the hiss of espresso in Wanda's coffee corner. Misty listened to all of it, the way some people listen to gossip. Wanda stood outside her shop, wiping down a metal table with slow circles. Her gray hair was twisted up, glasses pushed down her nose. "There's my girls," she called. Harper waved eagerly, but Misty's greeting was a quick lift of her head, a sniff that confirmed the same old smells: coffee, sugar, sanitizer, the mint gum Wanda always chewed to stay awake. Nothing new, nothing sharp. Mr. Boone was already parked on the bench across the street, cane hooked over his arm, paper folded to the crossword. He gave Misty a little salute as they passed, two veterans recognizing something in each other. She answered with a low wag and a slow blink. He had once slipped her a piece of jerky and whispered, "You ever need backup, you bark my way, okay?" Near the corner, a shutter click cut through the hum of traffic. On the second-floor balcony above Hatcher's Market, Riley Cooper lifted her camera, framing Harper and Misty in the soft morning light. She wasn't sure yet what story she was chasing. Habit just told her that kids and dogs on small-town streets always mattered. Misty's ears twitched at the sound, but the camera smelled like dust and old leather. Nothing dangerous. It changed when they reached the back lot of the market. A pickup sat there now, silver paint dulled, tailgate down. The man beside it, Kyle Mercer, hefted a plastic drum into the bed with a muted thud. The air shifted, carrying a bitter, chemical tang Misty had only ever known in training yards and fenced-off corners of distant bases. Her head snapped up. The world narrowed to that truck. Harper tugged the leash, confused when Misty stopped dead. The dog's muscles tightened under her coat, tail dropping a notch, nose working hard as she tasted rubber, diesel, and that sharp ghost of something that didn't belong in a grocery lot. Kyle turned just enough to glance their way, eyes flat, then went back to his loading. Misty took a single step backward, then another, drawing Harper with her, placing her body between the girl and the truck without waiting for anyone to tell her why. Jenna Ruiz liked the late morning shift. The worst of the early rush was over, the coffee had finally kicked in, and the dispatch room hummed with low, familiar noise. Fans whirred, scanners crackled, and sunlight fell across her keyboard in neat rectangles. She rolled her chair back, stretched once, and thought, not for the first time, that River Glen was an easy town to grow old in. The phone lit up with a jagged ring that did not match the calm. Jenna hit the button, pen already poised. On the other end, Wanda's voice tumbled out too fast, breathy, higher than usual. "There's a dog going crazy by Hatcher's, Jenna. Big dog. There's a little girl and some guy with drums or barrels or something. It sounds like they're going to explode, I swear to you. I heard a bang." Jenna tried to slow her down, but the words piled over each other. "He's throwing them into a truck. The dog's pulling the girl. It looks wrong, like it's going to snap any second." Years on the job taught Jenna to strip a call down to codes. She typed while Wanda talked, turning panic into phrases. Aggressive dog near child. Suspicious male with containers. Possible hazard. She glanced at the screen, watching her own words settle into the system. Aggressive. Near child. Male with unknown cargo. A small ache bloomed in her chest. In a big city, that was a Tuesday. In River Glen, it could be the one bad day everybody remembered. She routed the call to patrol, hit the radio, and felt her voice shift into the calm, clipped tone they all depended on. In the patrol car, Brent heard her before he saw anything. Unit 3, respond Hatcher's Market. Report of aggressive dog near juvenile, suspicious male loading containers, caller heard loud, bang, use caution. Beside him, Maddox muttered something under his breath and reached to turn the siren on. Dana checked the spare leash in the door pocket, a habit from quieter calls. Brent's jaw worked as he drove. He liked dogs. He hated the thought of one coming apart in front of a kid even more. Training reels ran in his memory in quick, ugly flashes. Slowed footage of bites, lectures about hesitation, phrases like liability and lethal decision. He told himself this was nothing, some overexcited shepherd barking at a delivery man. But his fingers tapped the wheel a little too hard. Misty and Harper had already left the back lot and circled around front. The pickup sat alone now, tailgate up, its chemical breath fading into the morning air. Misty still glanced back at it, ears pricked, but the stronger pull came from the crosswalk ahead, the place where tires and small sneakers always met. She eased forward, nudging Harper's leg with her shoulder as the girl fumbled for the button on the post. Across the street, Wanda watched with the helplessness of someone who had already called for help and could not unmake the words. The dog didn't look wild now. It looked focused. Still, her hands shook around the rag. On the balcony above, Riley Cooper raised her camera again, drawn by the patrol car rolling into frame, its lights strobing red and blue without sound. Misty felt the squad car before she saw it, that mix of hot engine and stiff upholstery and the faint metal tang of gun oil that clung to uniforms. The car slowed, then angled in toward the curb. The walk sign blinked on, and the delivery truck behind them revved, impatient, gearing up to blast through the yellow. Misty shifted, moving half a step ahead of Harper, body turned sideways to broaden the wall she made. From Brent's seat, everything seemed to snap into place in the worst way. A big golden dog stepping into the lane, a 10-year-old right behind it, a truck bearing down, horn beginning to growl. His mind stapled a frame together. Dog too close, kid off balance, no time to separate them. He opened his door, heart hammering, and yelled, "Hold your dog!" The words came out sharper, more afraid than he meant. Harper flinched at the shout and turned, one sneaker catching on the painted line. Misty felt the stumble and lunged sideways, shoulder slamming into Harper's knees to shove her back toward the safety of the sidewalk. The leash snapped tight, collar biting into fur. The truck's horn went from growl to full blast, a raw, angry sound that seemed to shove everything forward at once. Brent saw motion and panic, not the direction of the shove. All he caught was a big shape exploding across a small one, a flash of open mouth and flying leash, the truck hurtling closer than it really was. Training overrode doubt. He drew, brought the sight up, and fired in one practiced string of movements that felt, in that instant, like the only path between life and disaster. For Misty, the world narrowed to impact and heat. Something hit her chest like a hammer swung by a giant. Air tore out of her lungs in a wet burst. The ground slid sideways under her paws, paint and asphalt blurring together. She registered Harper's smell, sharp with fear now, and the tiny sound the girl made as they fell in a tangled heap just short of the curb. That sound pulled harder than the pain. The truck's brakes screamed, rubber burning a harsh line into the street as it skidded to a stop a few yards past them. For half a heartbeat, Main Street held its breath. Then noise crashed back in, all at once. Someone shouting, a bag tearing open and fruit rolling, Dana yelling Brent's name, Wanda crying out to God from the sidewalk. Harper's voice cut through it all, high and broken, calling Misty like a question. Misty tried to answer with movement. One paw scraped against the asphalt, then folded. The bell on her collar gave a weak, surprised jingle. The edges of her vision softened, color draining from the corners inward, leaving Harper's face as the sharpest thing left in the frame. The girl's hands pressed against her fur, warm and shaking, trying to hold everything inside that was already spilling away. Somewhere above them, a radio crackled for medical, for backup, for someone to explain how all of this had happened in a town that had been so quiet just an hour before. The garage smelled like oil and old steel, the kind of scent that clung to a man's clothes longer than any cologne. Dylan Lane lay on his back beneath a pickup, socket wrench snug around a stubborn bolt, radio murmuring some country station that barely reached River Glen. Misty's empty bed sat in the corner, just a worn blanket and a chewed rope where she usually slept when he worked late. He had almost called home during his coffee break, just to hear Harper complain about math and to listen to Misty's collar jingle in the background. Instead, he'd checked his watch, told himself they were already halfway to school by now, and slid back under the truck. Some part of him, the part that measured risks without trying, still counted their steps in his head, even when they were out of sight. The phone rang on the workbench with a sharp, urgent buzz that didn't fit the lazy rhythm of the day. Dylan slid out from under the pickup, wiping his hands on a rag as he reached for it. He saw the caller ID, Wanda's Cafe, and felt a strange weight drop into his stomach before he'd even answered. Wanda didn't call him at work. She passed notes in coffee and pie. Her voice came in broken pieces, words tripping over each other. "Dylan, you need to get to Hatcher's. It's Harper. And Misty. There was a shot. I don't know how bad, but you need to come now." The wrench slipped from his fingers and hit the concrete with a metallic clatter that seemed very far away. For a second, he couldn't tell if the ringing in his ears was the phone or his own blood. He didn't remember crossing the garage or locking the door. One moment, he was there with the smell of oil and dust. The next, he was in his truck, engine roaring harder than he meant, tires spitting gravel as he tore out into the street. Main Street blurred by in pieces. Boone's bench, Wanda's windows, the lake flashing silver behind the trees. None of it fully landing, just landmarks along a line he had to reach. He saw the patrol cars first, two of them crooked at the curb, lights spinning without sirens now. A delivery truck sat skewed in the lane, long black streaks on the pavement where brakes had burned rubber. People clustered on the sidewalk, pressed back by invisible tape, faces turned toward the crosswalk where the world had gone wrong. Dylan's hands tightened on the wheel until his knuckles went white. Misty lay in the middle of it, just inside the white lines of the crosswalk. Harper was folded over her, small body draped across golden fur, fingers buried so deep he couldn't see where the child ended and the dog began. Blood had pooled under them in a dark, widening stain. For a heartbeat, Dylan simply stopped moving. His brain cataloged the scene like a photograph he never wanted printed. Then sound slammed back into him. Harper sobbing, someone shouting for a medic, a radio spitting codes he didn't care about. He stepped out of the truck and walked forward, slow and deliberate, the way he had moved through streets far from River Glen, where sudden motion got men killed. Officers shifted in his path without thinking, something in his face or his stride telling them not to stand there. He knelt beside Harper, one hand on her shoulder. Her head snapped up, eyes wild, cheeks streaked with tears and streaks of Misty's blood. "Dad, they shot her!" she gasped. "She pushed me back. She was helping me, and they shot her." The words came out in hiccuping bursts, but the meaning was clean, sharp as broken glass. Misty's chest rose once under her, then shuddered and stilled. Dylan's gaze dropped to the dog. Even in death, Misty's body position screamed purpose. Angled across the crosswalk, shoulder pressed into the spot where Harper had been, front paws stretched just short of the curb. He saw the entry wound, the way the fur was burned and matted, the direction the blood had sprayed. His mind mapped angles and distances without asking permission, drawing lines from where she fell to where a gun had been. Behind him, a voice tried to fill the silence. Sergeant Maddox stepped closer, hands spread in a gesture that wanted to look reasonable. "Your dog went for your daughter, Lane. My officer had to make a call. He protected her." Dylan turned his head just enough to mark the man's face, then the younger one behind him, Brent, pale, eyes blown wide, gun hand still trembling near the holster. Neither of them looked at Misty like she'd done anything but fail. He didn't answer them. Not yet. Instead, he slid one arm under Harper and lifted her gently away from the dog, her fingers reluctant to let go of the bandana at Misty's neck. He wrapped her against his chest, feeling the sticky warmth of blood soak his shirt, and murmured something steady into her hair that his own heart did not feel. Over her small shoulder, his eyes returned to the scene. The shell casing near Brent's foot, the skid marks, the exact spot where Misty had made her last stand. That night, the house sounded wrong without claws on the floor. Harper's bedroom door stayed cracked open, a strip of light from the hallway cutting across her quilt where she lay curled up, Misty's blue bandana twisted around her fist. Dylan sat alone on the back steps, the chill from the concrete seeping through his jeans as the sky over the lake went from purple to black. In his right hand, he turned a ring over and over, the metal worn shiny at the edges. The ring was simple, more functional than pretty, engraved on the inside with letters most people in River Glen would not recognize. It had been a gift from men who did not shake hands easily. Ghost Unit. He had taken it off when he moved here, told himself he was done with cities where gunshots were just part of the weather. Tonight, the weight of it in his palm felt like a question he'd put off too long. The porch boards creaked, and Mr. Boone eased himself down beside him with the care of old knees. He didn't look at Dylan right away, just stared out at the thin line of lights across the lake. "I saw some of it," he said quietly. "Not all. Enough to know that dog wasn't going after that child." He paused, letting the words settle. They already started talking about it like it was just one bad call. Dylan's jaw flexed. He closed his hand around the ring, feeling the edges bite into his skin. Misty had spent her last breath doing what he'd trained her for. Read the threat, move the kid, take the hit if someone had to. She had done her job in a town that didn't even know what kind of dog they had. "She wasn't a bad call," he said finally, voice low. "She was the only one out there who got it right." The house settled into a heavy kind of quiet after Harper finally cried herself to sleep. The heater clicked on and off, pipes knocked in the walls, but the usual padding of paws along the hallway was gone. At the kitchen table, under the tired yellow light, Dylan sat alone with Misty's blue bandana spread out in front of him like a question he could not stop reading. The fabric was stiff in spots where the blood had dried, darker at the center where it had soaked through. His fingers traced the worn edge where Harper's small hands had tugged at it 100 times. Under the copper scent of blood, something else clung to it, faint but sharp. Not lake water, not soap, not ordinary street dust. Misty had been right about something, and nobody out there seemed in any hurry to find out what. He rose without hurry, chair scraping back across the worn linoleum. In the back of the house, past the laundry room with its leaning shelves, a narrow door sat locked behind an old coat rack. He moved the rack aside, keyed in a code from memory, and felt the tumblers click. The room beyond was not big, but it held a different life. A locked metal case, a plain laptop, and a duffel that never saw the light of River Glen streets. Dylan set the bandana gently beside the laptop and opened the screen. The glow lit his face in pale blue, smoothing the grease and fatigue into something harder. He slid his ring back onto his finger, the engraved side against his skin, and swiped his ID card through a reader most small-town mechanics did not own. Menus came up that never mentioned River Glen, only call signs and units people pretended did not exist. He clicked through to a secure channel and started a message out of habit, fingers hovering over the keys. Subject: Civilian K9 Incident, Stavros Possible Hazardous Materials. It looked wrong, too cold for what had happened in that crosswalk. He deleted half of it and hit the icon for a video call instead. Some conversations shouldn't be written down if you could help it. The screen rang twice before a woman's face appeared, lined not by age but by years of bad news. Major Evelyn Cross sat in an office with no decorations, just gray walls and a map full of pins. "Lane," she said, in that flat way of people who have seen every kind of trouble. "You're supposed to be teaching recruits how to kick indoors, not calling me from a kitchen table." He told her in the plainest words he had. Small town, daughter, dog, crosswalk, a round fired that never should have left the barrel. He described Misty's stance, the way she had pulled Harper back from that pickup, the bitter smell in the air he trusted his dog's nose more than his own to read. As he spoke, he laid the bandana closer to the camera, as if the fabric itself were a witness. Evelyn listened without interrupting, eyes slightly narrowed. "You've been out of the real game a while, Dylan," she said when he finished. "Sometimes a bad shot is just a bad shot. Are you telling me this is more than that because your dog had a feeling, or because your training tells you something else was in play?" He could hear the doubt, but he could also hear the part of her that had trusted his judgment for years. "Misty wasn't a pet chasing a squirrel," he answered quietly. "You saw her work before I brought her home. She never false alerted in training. Today she hit on that truck, swung her body between it and my kid, and died trying to finish the move. If she smelled something she'd been taught to fear, she was doing her job. I'm not letting them bury that under paperwork." Evelyn leaned back, the chair creaking just enough for the microphone to catch. For a long moment, all he could hear was the faint hum of her office. Then she nodded once. "All right, I'll regret this the next time someone audits my favors list. But all right, I'll loan you Briggs and Ward for a few days. Off the record. They'll look at your scene, your fabric there, and tell me if it smells like more than small-town tragedy." Noah Briggs, the quiet analyst who saw more in 3 seconds of footage than most men saw in an hour, and Sergeant Tessa Ward, K-9 handler, with a streak of stubborn that rivaled his own. Misty had followed Tessa around during her first months at the base, before he'd decided she'd do more good sleeping at the foot of Harper's bed than chasing shadows overseas. The thought made something twist in his chest. The next afternoon, River Glen watched a dark SUV roll slowly down Main Street and park not at the police station, but in front of Dylan's modest house. Wanda wiped her hands on her apron across the way. Boone lowered his paper and squinted. 2 figures stepped out, a lanky man with a messenger bag and tired eyes, and a compact woman with a working dog's leash coiled in her hand, though no dog trotted beside her yet. Inside, at the kitchen table, Dylan unfolded a rough map of town, marked with circles: Hatcher's Lot, the crosswalk, the route the pickup could have taken to vanish. Misty's bandana lay between the salt shaker and a chipped mug. Tessa picked it up gently, holding it close for a moment. Her eyes softened, the way handlers' eyes do when they touch something that belonged to a partner. She took a careful breath. "Blood, road grit, and something else," she murmured. "I'll need a lab to be sure, but I don't like that bite in the back of my throat." Noah was already setting up his laptop, pulling up traffic cam grids as if they were family photos. Dylan walked them through Harper's account, his own observations, the angle of the skid marks. Every time he mentioned Misty, it was as if they were talking about a fellow soldier, not just a dog. Harper hovered in the doorway, socks silent on the floor. She had been told visitors from Daddy's old job were coming, but nothing about the way they stood around Misty's bandana felt like a social call. For a second, she thought they were here to take what was left of her dog away. Her voice wobbled when she finally spoke. "Are you going to keep that?" Tessa turned, softened face turning softer still. "Only for a little while," she said. "We're going to let some very smart machines smell what Misty smelled. Then we'll bring it back. She was trying to tell you something, kiddo. We're just here to help her finish saying it." That was enough. After a long pause, Harper stepped forward and placed the folded bandana carefully into Tessa's waiting hands. When the SUV pulled away at dusk, carrying Misty's bandana sealed in a labeled evidence bag instead of knotted around her neck, Dillon stood on the porch with Harper tucked against his side. The lake reflected a thin band of fading orange, and Main Street's first lamps flickered on. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then fell silent. For the first time since the shot, Dillon felt the faintest shift from raw grief toward purpose, like Misty was still working the case from wherever good dogs went when their shift was finally over. The lab in Fort Bragg looked like any other government building from the outside, brick and narrow windows, but inside it hummed with the quiet attention of people who spent their days chasing invisible things. In a sealed room behind glass, Misty's bandana lay under a bright lamp, its blue cloth now tagged and numbered like any other piece of evidence pulled from a battlefield. Technicians in white coats moved around it with the care of people handling something that could still bite. Machines whirred, lights blinked. A spectrometer spat out a jagged line of data that meant little to most folks and everything to the woman reading it. She frowned, then checked the reference chart again, the way a vet might double-check a heart that didn't sound right. When the secure line rang on Dillon's laptop that afternoon, he already knew from the timing that it was about Misty. Evelyn's face shared the screen with the lab chief, Dr. Hayes, a woman with tired eyes and a calm voice. "We ran your cloth," Hayes said. "Blood, road debris, and traces of RDX precursors. Enough to say your dog had her nose on something she shouldn't have near a grocery store." She clicked another window open, bringing up a magnified image. "We also pulled epithelial cells that don't match your family or any officer on scene. They do, however, ping a partial in a joint task force database. Your Mr. Kyle Mercer has danced just outside our net before. Smuggling components, not bombs." "Yet?" The last word hung there like a door not fully closed. Tessa listened from a kitchen chair, boot tapping a quiet rhythm. She remembered Misty as a young dog, weaving through training lanes, stopping cold only when her nose hit the faint perfume of the same chemicals Hayes was now naming. "She never false alerted," Tessa said softly. "If that cloth smells like RDX, then she was telling the truth with her body when nobody else would listen." Noah slid a thumb drive into his laptop and pulled up traffic cameras again, this time knowing exactly what he was hunting. "Let's follow the truck she hated," he murmured. Frame by frame, they watched the silver pickup roll away from Hatcher's lot after the shooting, slip through two side streets, and disappear onto the service road that paralleled the old rail lines. River Glen's outskirts had places most town maps forgot to color in. Old warehouses, disused loading docks, gravel lots where weeds pushed through and trucks came and went without receipts. Noah traced the path to a faded sign half hidden behind vines, Northline Freight, the same company name that had popped up in two quiet federal memos about unusual shipping patterns. Dillon drove there at dusk with Tessa in the passenger seat, the sun sliding low enough to turn every dusty window into a mirror. They didn't go through the front gate. An old access road, almost eaten by grass, led them to the back side of the warehouse, where vents rattled and a single light burned over a side door. The place smelled of rust, river mud, and something sharper riding under the wind. They watched first, the way men and dogs are taught to do. A box truck backed up to a loading bay, no company logo, just plain white sides. Two men rolled drums out on a dolly, the same pale plastic as the ones in Harper's memory. Dillon's hand tightened on the steering wheel when a third figure stepped into the spill of light, clipboard in hand. Chief Marla Givens, out of uniform, hair tied back, eyes sweeping the lot like she owned the ground. Tessa let out a low breath between her teeth. "That's your chief," she said, though she already knew the answer. Givens spoke to the men briefly. One laughed, the other jerked a thumb toward the truck's cab. Money changed hands with the casual ease of folks splitting a bar tab. Dillon felt a slow heat build behind his ribs, less like rage and more like confirmation of a story he wished weren't true. Later, back at the house, he spread new photos on the table. Grainy shots of drums, license plates, the tilt of Given's chin under that loading dock light. Misty's absence felt like a third chair pulled back, waiting. Harper hovered near the doorway again, eyes catching on one picture of the silver pickup. "That's the truck," she whispered. "That's the one Misty didn't like." Her voice gave the image a weight even the pixels alone did not. They almost didn't see the envelope at first. It lay on the front step when Dylan opened the door to take the trash out. No stamp, just his last name scrawled in thick black marker. He opened it under the hallway lamp, shoulders squaring without meaning to. A single photo slid out. Harper and Misty walking past Boone's bench a week before, taken from across the street. On the back, in the same thick hand, someone had written, "Drop it, soldier." The words themselves weren't new. He'd heard versions of that line in other towns, other lives, from people with more power and less patience. But seeing them aimed at the picture of his daughter and the dog who had died for her twisted it into something deeper. It told him whoever sent it knew exactly who Misty had been and who he was before River Glen, and wanted both ghosts to stay buried. Dylan set the note down next to the bandana, now back from the lab in a clean evidence bag. Harper watched from the doorway, small fists clenched at her sides. "Are you going to stop?" she asked, as if the person with the marker lived right outside their windows. He looked at the bandana, at the picture, at the way Misty's leash had always been just a little too big for her neck until she grew into it. "No," he said quietly. "Your dog didn't stop when she smelled something wrong. Neither do I." Morning came to River Glen Police Department with burnt coffee and the tired buzz of fluorescent lights. Officers moved through the hallway a little quieter than usual, like the building itself knew something was coming. In the conference room at the end of the hall, a long table waited under a humming projector, chairs lined up as if this were just another training session and not the day the town's story would crack open. Sergeant Maddox sat near the head of the table, arms folded, jaw set, eyes on the door. Beside him, Brent Harlow stared at his own hands, fingers laced so tight his knuckles had gone pale. Officer Dana Kemp sat back from the table, unease in the way she kept shifting her gaze between them. Chief Marla Givens came in last, smoothing her blazer, the practiced calm of someone used to owning rooms like this. "You all know why we're here," Givens began, voice measured. "We review the incident, we show that procedures were followed, and we move forward. It was tragic, but—" The door opened before she could land the word. Conversation died. A man in dress uniform stepped in, followed by a woman with an officer's bearing and two strangers in dark suits who carried themselves like they were used to heavier doors. Dylan's uniform didn't have the shine of parades. It looked like it had seen more nights than days. The patch on his sleeve meant little to most of River Glen, but Given's eyes narrowed a fraction when she recognized the insignia from briefings she'd skimmed over the years. Major Evelyn Cross greeted no one with a smile, just set a folder on the table and nodded toward the projector. "We'll be using this," she said. "If you don't mind, Chief." The first image that filled the wall was not of a badge or a map, but of Misty, a still frame from Riley's camera, captured days before the shooting. The golden dog trotting beside Harper, ears forward, tail relaxed, eyes scanning the street as if it all belonged to her watch. For a moment, the room was quiet in a different way. Even Brent lifted his head, throat working as he looked at what he had turned into a memory. The image changed to grainy traffic cam footage. Noah's voice, calm and factual, narrated from the back of the room. He walked them through Misty's path that morning, step by step. How she stiffened near the pickup, how she moved her small handler away from it, how her body angle at the crosswalk was not toward the girl, but across her, between her and the oncoming truck. Every frame showed a dog doing what she had been trained to do. Then came the warehouse. The screen showed the back lot of Northline freight, drums rolling down ramps, men exchanging envelopes. A pause. Then the frozen image of Chief Givens in the dock light, clipboard in hand. Evelyn spoke this time, the words clipped. "We traced the drums Misty reacted to from your back lot to this warehouse. The same company that has come up in previous federal concerns about hazardous shipments. Your chief's presence there is notable." Givens opened her mouth, but one of the federal agents slid a document across the table. "We'll get to your side, Chief," he said evenly. "Right now, we're focusing on the decision that put a bullet through a trained dog's chest while she was responding to an actual threat." He clicked to the next slide. Lab results, Hayes' summary, the words RDX precursors and known associate of Kyle Mercer underlined. Misty's bandana appeared on screen, evidence tag stark under the lamp. Brent shifted in his chair like the air had gotten too thin. The footage rolled again, this time zoomed tight. Misty's shove, Harper's stumble, the truck's horn, the angle of Brent's arm. Noah overlaid a digital line tracing the bullet's path. It never intersected the child's body, only the dog's. "This is not a through the dog to stop the attack shot," Noah said quietly. "This is a direct shot at the animal." The distinction hung there, heavy. Dylan spoke for the first time, voice low enough that everyone had to lean in. "She read the street better than any of us did that day. You wrote her off as aggressive because it fit the report you wanted to file. My dog died doing the job some of you were supposed to do. Identify the real threat and protect the kid first." His eyes didn't leave Brent's face as he said it, but the words brushed across Maddox and Givens too. Something inside Brent finally cracked. He pushed back from the table, chair legs scraping, hands trembling. "I thought she was going for the girl," he blurted, the practiced line sounding thin now. Maddox kept saying it, over and over. "Dog went for the kid, you did what you had to do." "He told me to write it that way, said nobody wanted the headache if it got messy." His gaze flicked toward Maddox, accusation and fear tangled. Dana cleared her throat, voice barely above a whisper. "He did?" she said. "In the parking lot after. I heard him. Said, 'We're not losing our badges over somebody's pet. You write it up clean.'" Givens snapped at her to watch herself, but the room's balance had already shifted. The agents laid more. Papers on the table, financial transfers to Givens, shipping records, the quiet trail of Mercer's pickups in and out of town. Evelyn tapped the envelope photo up on the screen, the one with Harper and Misty, and the words, "Drop it, soldier" on the back. "We traced the marker ink and the print on the flap," she said. "It's amateur work, but even amateurs leave fingerprints. Officer Harlow, you want to explain why you tried to scare the father of a girl you protected into walking away from what his dog found?" The question landed like a second shot. Tears blurred Brent's eyes. "I panicked," he choked. "I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing her fall. Maddox said if Lane stirred things up, they'd look harder at the call, at me, at all of it. I thought if he got scared enough, he'd just stop. I wasn't thinking about the kid seeing it. I just wanted it all to go away." The words sounded smaller with each sentence, shrinking in the shadow of what Misty had done without a second thought. Dylan stood, but he didn't shout. He just walked to the end of the table, resting his hand briefly on the back of an empty chair. A chair that, in another world, could have held a golden dog's steady weight. "You were scared," he said, looking straight at Brent. "Misty wasn't. That's the only difference that matters to me now. She faced the thing that smelled wrong and put her body between it and my daughter. You fired on the one brave thing in that crosswalk." When it was over, Givens left in handcuffs, lips pressed into a hard line, escorted by the same uniforms she'd once commanded. Maddox followed, not in cuffs yet, but with a federal agent at each elbow and the weight of falsified reports catching up with him. Brent wasn't let out. He simply sagged back into his chair as if he'd lost the right to stand, the sound of Misty's collapse echoing in his head more clearly than any siren. Outside, the sky over River Glen was turning the soft blue of late afternoon, the lake catching the light like a sheet of glass. Dylan stepped onto the station steps, uniform collar open now, the air cooler on his skin. He looked down Main Street, where Harper once walked with Misty at her side, and knew this day wouldn't bring his dog back. But somewhere between the traffic cam frames and a blood-stiff bandana, the truth she'd scented had finally been spoken out loud. For a dog who never had a voice in any of their reports, it was a start. For a while after the hearing, River Glen moved like a town holding its breath. Patrol cars still rolled down Main, coffee still poured at Wanda's, but conversations dipped when Misty's name came up. Folks who had crossed the street to avoid Dylan before now nodded to him from a distance, unsure how to look a man in the eye after learning his dog had died, saving their town from a quiet kind of trouble. The official words came on a Wednesday, under a gray sky that couldn't decide whether to rain. In front of the courthouse, a podium and a row of microphones waited. The federal agent who had said little during the hearing spoke for the cameras now, reading from a prepared statement that still managed to sound heavier than paper. Beside him, a blown-up photo of Misty in her blue bandana rested on an easel. He said the words slowly, so no one could pretend they misheard. The animal did not attack the child. The animal reacted appropriately to the presence of hazardous materials. The animal's actions likely prevented a larger incident near a public market and school zone. For once, a report put the dog at the center as more than a footnote. It called her what she had been that day, a protector. Harper stood between Dylan and Mr. Boone, hands wrapped around the podium's rail, even though she wasn't the one speaking. When they said Misty's name, she straightened a little, like the dog might somehow feel it wherever brave animals go when their work is finished. Reporters turned their lenses toward her, but the town watched the photograph, the golden face they had misjudged from across the street. Later, the crowd thinned into smaller circles. Some folks came up to Dylan, stumbling over apologies, trying to fold their regret and their fear into sentences that did not quite fit. He took most of it quietly. Wanda pressed a warm cup of coffee into his hand without saying anything at all. Boone squeezed his shoulder once, that half-salute he used when words were too small. It wasn't forgiveness. It was acknowledgement. The memorial happened on a softer day, one the lake decided to wear blue instead of steel. In the lane backyard, under a maple tree that had dropped most of its leaves, a small group gathered. There was no uniformed honor guard, no rifle salute, just neighbors and a few soldiers from Ghost Unit who had driven up on their own time, drawn by the story of one of their own who had worn fur instead of boots. At the base of the tree, a wooden box rested in a shallow hole. Harper had lined it herself with one of Misty's blankets, the corners still holding the faint imprint of a paw. Inside lay the urn, the old rope toy, and the bandana now washed clean but still bearing a shadow of the darker stain that had changed everything. It did not look like much. Heroes rarely do when you put them in a box. Harper unfolded a sheet of paper with careful hands. Her voice shook at first, then steadied as she read the letter she'd written the night before. She thanked Misty for walking her to school every morning, for pulling her away from the truck, for being braver than the grown-ups whose job had protection printed on their cards. When she said, "You knew before anybody else that something was wrong," even the wind in the maple seemed to pause and listen. Dylan lowered the box into the earth with a motion that looked a lot like every burial he'd ever helped with overseas, just smaller and closer to his own front door. He pressed the soil back with his hands, not a shovel, as if the act needed skin in it. When he stood, he came to attention out of habit, hand raised to his brow. The salute he gave Misty wasn't textbook. It was older than manuals, the kind men offer to the rare few they would have followed through any door. After the others drifted away, the yard settled into a quiet that felt less empty than before. A small marker Dylan had carved himself stood at the base of the maple. Misty. She saw what we didn't. Harper traced the letters with one finger. She'd like it, she said, almost to herself. Nearby, the grass where Misty used to roll in the sun looked oddly untouched, as if the dog might come racing around the corner any second. A week passed, then another. Life, stubborn thing that it is, kept going. One cold afternoon, a dark SUV rolled up again, this time without ghost unit plates on the front. A plain wooden crate sat strapped in the back. The driver handed Dylan a clipboard and a folded note, the kind of delivery that didn't show up on any online tracking page. Harper hovered on the porch, eyes wide, already suspecting. Inside the crate, on a bed of shredded paper and an old towel that still carried the faint sense of a distant kennel, a golden puppy blinked up at them. Her paws were too big for her body. Her ears flopped in a way she'd grow out of. Around her neck, a brand-new collar held a tag stamped with a single word: Nova. When Dylan read the note aloud, "For the bravest girl we know, from the unit that learned a little more about courage from her dog," Harper's breath hitched. They didn't call Nova a replacement. Nobody could. The first time Dylan clipped a leash on her and stepped out onto Main Street, he felt the difference. Nova was clumsy where Misty had been sure-footed, curious where Misty had been cautious. But when a delivery truck rattled too close at the corner, Nova's small body shifted without thinking, nudging Harper back a step, planting herself between girl and street, as if some quiet instruction had passed down through blood and memory. That evening, as the sun slid down behind the lake and the town's windows began to glow, Harper and Nova walked the same route she had once taken with Misty. People waved, a little less awkward now. Boone lifted his cane in greeting. Wanda set a dog biscuit on the counter, just in case. Up ahead, the crosswalk gleamed faintly where fresh paint covered old stains. Nova paused there, sniffed the air, then looked up at Harper as if to say, "I've got it." From the porch, Dylan watched them, hands in his pockets, shoulders finally a fraction looser. The ache of Misty's absence hadn't left. It had simply changed shape, settling into something that hurt less like an open wound and more like a medal worn under a shirt. Somewhere between the rustle of maple leaves and the jingle of Nova's collar, he could almost hear the steady rhythm of another set of paws keeping time with theirs, making sure the little town of River Glen had learned what it needed to from one K9 who never stopped doing her job. If you're still here, thank you for watching this story all the way to the end. If you want to show some love for Misty, just drop a simple 1 in the comments. Your comment helps this story reach more people, and if you'd like to hear the next true-hearted story we share, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We've got more powerful emotional journeys coming up, and I'd love to have you with us for every one of them.